I'm 68, and I'm currently locked in my own guest bathroom. I can hear them through the door. My son, Lucas, and his wife, Sarah. They're arguing about what to do with me. They think I'm just some frail old woman. They forgot I'm the one who taught them how to be so damn ruthless. But before I tell you how I'm getting out of here, and how I'm going to tear their world apart, do me a favor. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We'd love to hear where our stories are going, so drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. You won't want to miss what happens next. For 40 years, my life was the kind you see in magazines, the ones you flip through at the dentist's office and quietly hate. My husband, Arthur, and I lived in a sprawling old money brownstone in Beacon Hill, Boston. He was a respected historian, the kind who wore tweed jackets without a hint of irony, and I ran a small, exclusive art gallery that frankly funded our comfortable lifestyle. We weren't just well off. We were rich, we had history, we had class, and we had 2 beautiful children, Chloe and Lucas. Chloe was our firstborn. God, she was sunlight, brilliant, sharp, and fiercely loyal. She was top of her class at Harvard Law, engaged to a decent guy, the whole 9 yards. She was my legacy. And then there was Lucas. Lucas was a problem. He was the charismatic black sheep, the kid who could talk his way out of a speeding ticket and into your wallet. While Chloe was building a future, Lucas was bouncing between startups that never seemed to start, always needing a small loan to cover his temporary cash flow problem. Arthur, bless his trusting heart, always said Lucas just saw the world differently. I knew better. Lucas saw the world in dollar signs. Our perfect curated life cracked 10 years ago. Chloe was out on the Cape with friends. A boating trip. They said a rogue wave hit, that the storm came up too fast. They never found her body. The grief hollowed us out. It took Arthur and me and sanded us down to nothing. I shut down the gallery. Arthur retired, spending his days in his study, surrounded by books on wars that felt less tragic than our own. But the strange part? The tragedy made Lucas. It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, our problem son was responsible. He was at the house every day. He handled the funeral arrangements with a cold efficiency that I, in my fog of grief, mistook for strength. He started managing Arthur's accounts. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd say, rubbing my shoulders. "I'll take care of everything." A year later, he introduced us to Sarah. She was quiet, mousy, and seemed to worship the ground he walked on. She was a paralegal, she said, though she seemed vague on the details. They married in a small courthouse ceremony. "We don't want a big fuss, Mom. Not after Chloe," Lucas explained. It sounded so sensitive, so thoughtful. For a while, things were quiet. Lucas and Sarah lived in the city, visiting us on weekends. They were the perfect doting children. My friends told me how lucky I was, how Lucas had truly stepped up. I almost believed it. I wanted to believe it. Then Arthur got sick. It started slowly. A tremor in his hand, a drag in his foot. Parkinson's, the doctor said. A long, slow decline. That's when Lucas and Sarah made their move. "Mom, you can't handle this alone," Lucas insisted, his brow furrowed with that practiced concern of his. "The stairs are too much for Dad. You're both getting older. Let us move in. Let us help." It felt like a tidal wave of relief. Of course they would help. We were a family. They moved into the 3rd floor. At first it was wonderful. Sarah cooked. Lucas organized Arthur's physical therapy. They were present. The first 6 months were a blur of doctor's appointments and medication schedules. Arthur's decline was faster than we expected. He was confused more often, weaker. The specialists were baffled, but chalked it up to an aggressive form of the disease. The suggestions started small. "Mom, this house is a money pit," Lucas would say, sipping a $200 bottle of wine from Arthur's cellar. "The upkeep is insane. We should really look at downsizing. Maybe a nice condo, all on 1 floor." "But your father built his library here," I'd argue. "Dad's not reading anymore, Mom," he'd reply, his voice dripping with faux pity. Then came the finances. Sarah, with her paralegal background, took the lead. "Eleanor, honey, your system is just archaic," she said one afternoon, looking at my leather-bound ledger. "Let me digitize everything. Put it in the cloud. It'll be so much simpler." Like a fool, I gave her the passwords. Last Tuesday, they called a family meeting. Arthur was having a lucid day, bundled in blankets in his favorite chair. Lucas and Sarah stood before us, holding hands, looking grim. "Dad, Mom, we need to talk about the future," Lucas began. He slid a thick stack of documents onto the coffee table. "We had our lawyer, a specialist in elder care, draw this up. It's a new power of attorney and an update to the will." I stiffened. "We have a lawyer, Lucas, Mr. Henderson." Sarah smiled, a thin, tight-lipped expression. "Mr. Henderson is old school, Eleanor. He doesn't understand modern asset protection. This new trust, it protects the estate. From what?" She paused. "From medical debts. From taxes. It puts everything in Lucas's name now to manage for you. It's the safest thing." Arthur was already drifting off, his meds kicking in. Lucas gently took his father's hand and placed a pen in it. "It's just a formality, Dad, to make sure Mom is taken care of." Arthur scrawled his signature. Then they turned to me. I felt the weight of their combined stare. My hand was shaking as I signed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt wrong. Cold. I went downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed Arthur's study, I saw a light on under the door. I heard Sarah's voice, sharp and clear. "Can't believe how easy it was. The old man barely knew what he was signing." "He'll be gone by Christmas, tops," Lucas replied. His voice was low, casual. "The new nurse understands the protocol. A little extra morphine in his evening cocktail. It just eases his transition." My blood turned to ice. Eases his transition. They weren't just waiting for him to die. They were making him die. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ran to my room and locked the door. I knew they were poisoning my husband, but I still didn't understand why. The will was signed. They were getting everything. I needed proof. For the last 2 days, I've pretended. I've been the grieving, clueless wife. This morning, they both left for a consultation at the bank. I knew I had 1 hour. I went straight to the attic, to Chloe's things. The boxes we hadn't touched in a decade. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. An old college trunk. Tucked beneath her sorority sweaters was a locked metal file box. I'd always assumed it was old school work. I broke the lock with a fireplace poker. It wasn't schoolwork. It was a file on Lucas' bank statements, printed out emails, a restraining order from a girl I'd never heard of, and an insurance policy, a life insurance policy. One Chloe had taken out on herself. A $2 million policy dated 6 weeks before her accident, and the sole beneficiary wasn't her fiancé. It wasn't me or Arthur. It was Lucas. My daughter, my brilliant, sharp daughter. She knew he was dangerous. She was building a case against him, and somehow he found out. That boating accident, that rogue wave, it was my son. He'd killed his sister for $2 million, and now he was killing his father for the rest. The silence in the attic was so thick I could feel it pressing against my skin, heavier than the decade of dust. I was holding the file box. Chloe's box. My hands, spotted with age, were gripping the cold metal so tightly my knuckles were white. He killed my baby. The thought wasn't a scream. It was a cold, hard shard of ice sliding into my heart. My son. My Lucas. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Every temporary cash flow problem, every charming, manipulative smile, every small loan Arthur and I had given him, it all replayed in my mind, but now it was sinister. It wasn't incompetence. It was practice. I heard the garage door opener whine downstairs. They were back. My body, which had felt 68 years old and broken just a minute ago, was suddenly flooded with adrenaline. I wasn't a grieving mother. I was a cornered animal. I shoved the papers, the insurance policy, the bank statements, the restraining order, back into the metal box. I couldn't put it back in Chloe's trunk. That's the first place they'd look if they got suspicious. My eyes scanned the shadows. In the corner under a canvas tarp were my old travel trunks, the ones from my honeymoon in Italy. I hadn't looked in them since Arthur first got sick. I jammed the file box into my largest hat box, the one from a trip to Paris in '78, and buried it under a pile of silk scarves that still smelled faintly of my old perfume. They would never, ever look in there. That hat box represented a life Sarah would never understand, and Lucas would never value. I slipped out of the attic and closed the door, wiping the dust off my hands onto my slacks. I forced myself to walk down the stairs, not run, one slow, deliberate step at a time. You are Eleanor Davenport, I told myself. You've hosted senators. You've faced down art critics. You will not be undone by this parasite. I found Arthur in his study. He was slumped in his chair, his head lolled to the side, a small thread of drool on his chin. He looked paler than when I'd left him. The new nurse, a blocky woman named Brenda, who never met my eye, was adjusting his blanket. "He's had a long morning, Mrs. Davenport," she said in a flat, monotone voice. I bet he has, I thought. I touched Arthur's cheek. It was cool. Too cool. Mom, we're home. Lucas's voice boomed from the foyer. He sounded cheerful, giddy. He and Sarah walked in, their arms full of shopping bags from Copley Place. Not groceries. Luxury goods, look, Sarah trilled, pulling a cashmere throw from a bag. For the living room. The old one was just so drab. She was redecorating, while my husband was dying just one room over. And Mom, Lucas said, pulling out a small, sleek box. A new phone for you. Yours is practically an antique. This one is all top of the line. Sarah can set it up. Get all your contacts moved. It wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. A tracking device. A leash. How lovely, dear, I said, my voice smooth as glass. You shouldn't have. Only the best for my favorite girl, he said, kissing my cheek. I had to fight the urge to scrub the spot raw. The rest of the day was a performance. I was the doting wife, the clueless mother. I asked Sarah about the new throw. I let her set up my new phone, conveniently forgetting the password to my cloud account so she'd have to do it manually. I needed to see how far they would go. The answer came at 8 p.m. Medication time. Nurse Brenda rolled a small cart into the study. Arthur was barely conscious, but his eyes fluttered open when I sat beside him and held his hand. Time for his evening meds, Sarah announced, hovering by the door. She was here every night for this. I'd always thought it was devotion. Now I knew it was supervision. I watched Brenda's hands. She crushed 2 pills and mixed them into a small cup of applesauce. She prepared a glass of water. Then, she turned her back to me for just a second, reaching for a small, amber-colored vial in her pocket. She uncapped it, her thumb over the label, and added 3, maybe 4, cloudy drops to the water. Eases his transition. The bile rose in my throat. This was it. This was the protocol. Arthur, honey, Brenda cooed, moving toward him with the applesauce. I stood up. My knee buckled. I let out a small old lady cry, "Oh dear," and stumbled forward, my arms flailing. My hand struck the cart. The entire tray, applesauce, pills, the glass of poisoned water, and a dozen other vials, went flying. The glass shattered on the hardwood floor. The applesauce splattered across Sarah's very expensive, very new Italian shoes. There was a moment of perfect, absolute silence. Brenda was frozen, her mouth open. Arthur startled, his eyes wide for the first time in weeks. Sarah looked down at her shoes, then up at me. Her mousy, quiet face was gone. What looked back at me was pure reptilian hatred. "You clumsy old bitch," she hissed, her voice low and tight. "Sarah!" Lucas yelled, running in from the hall. He'd heard the crash. He took in the scene. The glass, the nurse, Sarah's face, and me, standing there looking horrified. "Mom, what the hell?" he snapped. The concerned son was gone. This was the voice I'd heard in the attic. "Oh, Lucas, I'm so sorry," I stammered, putting my hand to my chest. "My knee, it just gave out. I don't know what happened." "Oh, Arthur, are you all right?" Lucas's eyes were narrowed. He wasn't buying it. He looked at Sarah, and a silent, ugly conversation passed between them. He had seen me, for one split second before I faked the stumble. He knew I'd done it on purpose. "It's okay, Mom," he said, but his voice was like gravel. "Accidents happen." He turned to the nurse. "Brenda, clean this up. Sarah, go change your shoes." He helped me to my chair. His grip on my arm was too tight. It was a warning. "You know, Mom," he said, kneeling in front of me, his face a mask of false concern. "You've been under so much stress. You're not yourself. You're getting forgetful, confused." "I'm perfectly fine, Lucas," I said, pulling my arm free. "No, I don't think you are," he said, his voice dropping. "We're worried you're a danger to yourself. And to Dad," He nodded toward the mess. What if that had been bleach? Or something worse? He stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over me. I think it's time you had a rest, he said. He walked over to my new, top-of-the-line phone, which was charging on the desk. He picked it up and slipped it into his pocket. What are you doing? I demanded. You need a break from all the stimulation, Mom. Doctor's orders. We can't have you getting worked up. Give me my phone, Lucas. Go to your room, Mom. We'll bring your dinner up, Sarah said, reappearing in the doorway. You're done for the night. They weren't asking. They were telling. I was 68 years old, in my own home, and I had just been grounded. Like a teenager, I stood up, my spine rigid. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing my fear. I walked past them, head held high, and went up the grand staircase. I didn't look back. I got to my bedroom, the master suite I had shared with Arthur for 40 years. I closed the door, and I heard the click. I grabbed the handle. It didn't turn. I rattled it. Lucas, Sarah, what is the meaning of this? I heard Lucas's voice, muffled from the other side. It's for your own good, Mom. We'll talk in the morning, when you're calm. I heard their footsteps walking away. I was locked in, a prisoner in my own bedroom. They had my husband, they had my money, and now they had me. They thought they'd won. They thought the old woman was beaten, neutralized. They forgot. I'm the one who paid for this house. I'm the one who knows every secret. And I'm the one who just found my daughter's murder file. The game wasn't over. It was just starting. The click of that lock wasn't just a sound. It was a declaration. It was Lucas and Sarah, in their new money, brute force way, telling me I was irrelevant, an object, a piece of furniture to be locked away when it was inconvenient. I stood in the opulent master suite, my suite, and felt a rage so cold and pure it burned away the last 40 years of fog. They thought they were caging a confused old woman. They had no idea they'd just locked themselves in with a monster. I didn't rattle the handle again. I didn't scream. I just stood, and I listened. I heard their footsteps retreat down the hall. I heard the murmur of their voices, Lucas's low and angry, Sarah's sharp and complaining. I heard the click of the study door. They were in with Arthur, probably checking on him, which meant finishing the job I'd interrupted. Okay, Eleanor, you know this house. They just know its price tag. Lucas and Sarah had lived here for 2 years, but they'd only ever seen the surface. They saw the grand staircase, the ballroom, the renovated kitchen. They had no idea about the bones. This was a 1905 Beacon Hill brownstone. It was a labyrinth of forgotten intentions. My master suite was palatial. It had the main bedroom, my dressing room, Arthur's dressing room, and a massive ensuite bathroom that was bigger than Sarah's first apartment. I walked into the bathroom. The floor was cold Italian marble. The walls were covered in a silk wallpaper that Sarah had called tacky and dated. It has to go, Eleanor, she'd said, running her acrylic nail over the hand-painted heron. That's why she missed it. Behind the antique freestanding linen cabinet, the wallpaper had a seam that didn't quite match. It wasn't a flaw. It was a door. A narrow 2-foot-wide service door, built for maids in 1905 to haul linens without disturbing the masters. It hadn't been opened in at least 50 years. I grabbed the edge of the heavy cabinet and, with a groan that came from both me and the wood, I pulled. My body screamed. I was 68. I was a frail old woman. But adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I slid the cabinet just 6 inches, enough to get my fingers around the door's edge. It was stuck, of course. Painted over, swollen with decades of Boston humidity. I went into my dressing room, past the rows of shoes they were already planning to sell at auction. I grabbed the sturdiest thing I owned, a brass-handled letter opener from Arthur, a gift from our 20th anniversary. I jammed it into the seam. I twisted. Wood splintered. Paint cracked. With a sound like a cough, the door popped open. It opened onto a small, dark, dusty landing. The old servants' stairs. They were narrow, steep, and smelled like dead air. But they were my ticket. This staircase connected every floor, from the basement to the attic, completely bypassing the main hall. They had locked one door. They forgot I had 5 others. My first thought was the phone. I crept down one flight to the main library. I picked up the heavy, antique brass receiver. Dead, of course. They'd cut the landline. They were thorough, I'll give them that. They'd taken my cell, cut the hard line. They thought I was totally isolated. My next stop was Arthur. I used the servants' stairs to go back up to the second floor, emerging into a hallway utility closet. I slipped out, a ghost in my own home. I padded across the Persian rug to the study. The door was ajar. I peeked through the crack. Nurse Brenda was there, but she wasn't a nurse. She was a guard. She was sitting in a leather wingback chair, her back to me, snoring. She'd clearly helped herself to something from Arthur's bar. Arthur was in his hospital bed, which they'd moved into the study. He was so still. His breathing was a shallow, wet rattle. I wanted to run to him, to shake him awake, to tell him I was sorry. But I was on a mission. On the table next to Brenda, next to a half-empty glass of my best scotch, was the amber-colored vial. The protocol, I didn't even think. I am not a thief. I am a collector. I slipped into the room. The floorboards didn't creak for me. They were on my side. I held my breath, grabbed the vial, and slid it into the pocket of my silk robe. I backed out. She never stirred. Now for the prize. I went up the servants' stairs, all the way up, past my locked bedroom, past the third floor, to the attic. The air was different up here. Cold. Still. It smelled like cedar and memory. And dust. I went straight to my Paris 78 hat box buried under the silk scarves. I pulled out Chloe's metal file box. It felt heavy. Heavier than it had this morning. This was my daughter's last will and testament, not the one for her money, but the one for her life. This was her voice reaching out from a decade ago, telling me I knew. I saw him. Now you do too. I clutched the box to my chest. I couldn't leave it here. I couldn't leave it in my room. Lucas and Sarah were stupid, but they weren't that stupid. If they found me gone, they would tear my room apart. I needed a new hiding place. Somewhere secure. Somewhere only I would go. I crept back down the main staircase this time, one slow step at a time, listening. The house was silent. They were probably in the kitchen, toasting their victory with my husband's wine. I walked down the second-floor hall, past the grand portrait of Arthur's grandfather. I went to the guest wing. At the end of the hall was a bathroom, a small, simple one we rarely used. It was paneled in dark mahogany, with a finicky old toilet and a leaky faucet. Sarah hated it. It's a gut job, she'd declared. We'll have to tear it down to the studs. Perfect. I went inside. I locked the heavy, old-fashioned bolt lock. Thunk. I stood in the darkness for a moment, just breathing. I had the vial. I had the file. I was free. I looked for a hiding place. The vanity was flimsy. The medicine cabinet was too obvious. Then I looked at the toilet. The big old porcelain tank. I lifted the heavy lid. It was full of water, rust, and old mechanics. It was perfect. I wrapped Chloe's file box in the plastic bag that lined the small trash can, and I lowered it into the water. It sank to the bottom. I put the lid back on. No one, especially not Princess Sarah, would ever look in there. I was about to hide the amber vial when I heard them. Footsteps. Rushing. She's not in the room. It was Lucas, his voice a panicked roar. The linen closet door is broken. She's out. Sarah shrieked. I heard them run down the hall, rattling doorknobs. Mom, where the hell are you? I stood by the guest bathroom door, my heart a trapped bird. I heard them stop, right outside. Silence. Then a quiet, methodical thump, thump, thump on the door. Mom? Lucas's voice was calm now. The fake calm. The dangerous calm. We know you're in there. The servants' stairs were the only other way down. You're not as clever as you think you are. I stayed absolutely silent. Open the door, Mom. Don't make this harder. I didn't move. I heard him sigh. Fine. He whispered something to Sarah. I heard her footsteps retreat. You know, Mom, he said, his voice casual, as if we were discussing the weather. We were trying to make this easy. For you and for Dad, a simple transition. But you had to make it difficult. You had to interfere. I heard Sarah return. I heard the jingle of metal. You're a real piece of work, Eleanor. Sarah's voice, muffled but full of venom. But Lucas is right. This house has secrets. We found the old skeleton key box in the library. I looked at the old-fashioned keyhole on the bolt lock, and then I heard it. The scrape of metal. the click of the skeleton key turning in the lock from the outside. They had just locked me in. I was trapped in a tiny, dark mahogany bathroom. But I wasn't the old Eleanor. I was the new Eleanor. I had the vial of poison in my pocket. I had my daughter's murder file hidden 3 feet away, and they had just given me exactly what I needed. Time. Time to think. Time to plan, and a locked door to keep them out. They thought they had trapped me. They had no idea I had just trapped them. The thunk of the bolt, followed by the scrape of the key, was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my enemies underestimating me. It was the sound of a caged door closing, but they were the ones trapped on the other side, blinded by their own greed. They thought they'd contained the problem. They had no idea they'd just given me a sanctuary. I sat on the cold, tiled floor of the dark mahogany bathroom. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I listened. Is that it? I heard Sarah's reedy voice, high with a mix of adrenaline and irritation. Is she just sitting in there? Let her. Lucas's voice was a low growl. She's a stubborn old bat. She can sit in the dark and think about what she's done. We have more important things to attend to. What about, him? Brenda's with him. The protocol is in motion. It'll be over by morning. It'll look peaceful. Tragic, but peaceful. A grieving wife, locked in her own bathroom, confused and hysterical. It's perfect. I heard their footsteps fade down the hall. I heard the distant, heavy thud of the study door closing. They were going back to Arthur. Back to their vigil of death. It'll be over by morning. That one phrase echoed in the small, dark room. I wasn't just fighting for Chloe's memory or for my own freedom. I was in a race against the clock for my husband's life. Okay, Eleanor, assess your assets. 1. I was alive. 2. I had the amber vial of poison in the pocket of my silk robe. 3. I had the brass letter opener, still warm from my grip, in my other pocket. 4. I had a mind that had spent 40 years navigating the cutthroat politics of the Boston art world. This was just a smaller, uglier gallery. And 5. I had a window. It was small, frosted, and high up, just as I remembered. It was built for ventilation, not for viewing, and probably led to an old 3-foot-wide air shaft. It was secured with a simple brass-colored sash latch, caked in at least 3 layers of white paint. I dragged the small upholstered vanity stool over. It wobbled, but it held my weight. I was eye level with the latch. I took out the letter opener. It was a gift from Arthur. To open the future, my love, he'd said. How right he was. I jammed the pointed brass tip into the seam between the window sashes. I put my shoulder into it and pried. Nothing. The paint was like concrete. I didn't curse. I just recalibrated. I wasn't a 30-year-old. I couldn't use brute force. I had to use precision. I worked the tip of the opener back and forth, scraping the paint out of the groove, bit by bit. It was agony. My fingers ached and my shoulder burned. Dust and paint chips rained down on my face. After what felt like an hour, I had cleared a groove. Now for the latch. I wedged the opener under the brass lever and pushed up. The old, cheap metal groaned, bent, and then snapped. The window was unlocked. I pushed the bottom sash up. It shrieked in protest, but moved. A rush of cold, damp city air hit me, smelling of diesel and old rain. I was right. An air shaft. Below, 3 stories down, was a dark square of concrete. But to my left, running along the brick facade of the guest wing, was a narrow maintenance ledge. It wasn't much, maybe 4 inches wide, 5 at most. It was a tiny, terrifying, beautiful pathway to freedom. It led, I knew, past the solid brick wall of the hallway, directly to the window of the adjoining guest bedroom. A distance of maybe 10 feet. 10 feet of sheer brick-faced terror. You taught senators how to bid, Eleanor, I told myself. You can do this. I stuck one leg out the window, my silk robe hiking up. My house slipper, a flimsy, useless thing, snagged on the frame. I kicked it off. I was doing this in my bare feet. Better for grip. I got my other leg out, my entire body now in the air shaft. I was 68 years old, in my nightclothes, clinging to a window frame 3 stories above the ground. I felt a sudden hysterical bubble of laughter. If only my old bridge club could see me now. I planted my bare feet on the ledge. The brick was cold and bitingly sharp against my skin. I pressed my back flat against the wall. Don't look down. I shuffled. One foot, then the other, Scrape, scrape. My robe caught on a loose bit of mortar. I ripped it free. I reached the guest bedroom window. It was, as I expected, locked from the inside. I held my breath. I had one shot at this. I still had the letter opener. I wedged it between the sashes, just as I had before. But this time, I wasn't just prying a latch. I was breaking a lock. I put all my weight, all my rage, all my grief for Chloe and Arthur into that one movement. Crack. The sound of the woodlock splitting was like a gunshot in the silent night. I froze. I listened. Nothing. No shouting. No running footsteps. They were too absorbed in their ghoulish task, probably already celebrating, the laptop open, the Cayman accounts filling up. I pushed the window open, tumbled through, and landed in a heap on the priceless Aubusson rug. I was a mess of torn silk, bleeding feet, and sweat. But I was out, and they had no idea. I was a ghost in my own house. I didn't waste a second. I slipped out of the guest room. The hallway was dark. I moved on silent, bare feet. The servants' stairs were right there. I crept down, my hand on the cold, smooth banister. My target was the study. I paused at the utility closet on the second floor. I listened. From the study, I heard it, a low rhythmic snore. I opened the door. The scene was just as I'd left it. Nurse Brenda out cold in the wingback chair, the empty scotch glass on the table beside her. And Arthur, my Arthur, his breathing was so shallow I could barely see his chest rise. I walked over to the nurse. She reeked of my husband's best scotch. Her ID badge, clipped to her scrubs, read Brenda Kowalski. Brenda Kowalski, the name I would give to the police. I looked at the empty glass. I looked at the amber vial of poison in my hand, and a new plan, a better plan, a terrible and perfect plan, clicked into place. Why just frame them? Why not let them frame each other? I unscrewed the cap of the poison. I poured every last drop into the empty scotch glass, swirling it around. The dregs of the alcohol and the cloudy poison mixed into a lethal slurry. I slipped the empty vial into Brenda's scrub pocket. Then I went to the hospital bed. "Arthur," I whispered, my lips brushing his ear. "I'm here. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to fix this. For you. For Chloe. I love you." He didn't stir, but I knew he'd heard me. I crept back to the servants' stairs. I went up, not down, up to the guest wing. I went back into the guest bedroom, the one I'd broken into. I crossed to the bathroom. Now for the performance of a lifetime. I climbed back out the window, onto the ledge. I inched my way in the dark, back to the bathroom of my prison. I slipped back inside, pulling the window sash down. I used the letter opener to bend the broken latch back into a position where it looked closed. I went to the sink and washed the grime and blood from my feet. I didn't want to contaminate the scene. Then I sat on the floor, my back against the locked door. I crossed my legs. I put the letter opener in my lap. I was back in my cell, but this time, I wasn't a prisoner. I was the bait. And the trap was set. All I had to do was wait for one of them to die. I sat on the cold mahogany floor of that bathroom. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need it. I could think better in the dark. And besides, the first watery gray light of dawn was beginning to seep through the frosted glass. 1 hour, 2. I slowed my breathing, matching it to the old house's groans. Patience. It's the one weapon the young never master. And then, at 6:02 a.m., I heard it. The sound I'd been waiting for. It wasn't a scream. It was a guttural, ugly sound. "My son, Lucas, damn it!" A beat of silence. Then Sarah's panicked, bird-like shriek. "What? What is it? Is he gone?" "No," Lucas roared. He's still breathing." "Damn it! Damn it!" I saw a sliver of light appear under the door. They were in the hall. What about the nurse? What the hell did we pay her for? Sarah's voice was cracking. "Go get her. That useless..." Lucas's heavy footsteps stormed toward the study. I heard it. A slap. A hard, open-palmed sound. Then a groan from Nurse Brenda. "Get up, you drunk! You were supposed to..." A silence. This one was different. More dangerous. "Lucas?" Sarah's voice, now thin and terrified. "What is that?" "What?" In her pocket. The vial. "It's empty. And this..." Lucas's voice was low, deadly. "This glass. It smells like it. This is a setup. What do you mean? She drank it and died? No, you idiot. She's passed out, Lucas roared. The old woman. She got out. She did this. She set us up. Now they were running. Heavy, panicked footsteps pounding the hall. They stopped at my door. Mom. Lucas rattled the handle, a violent, desperate sound. Open the door. Open the goddamn door. I said nothing. You old bitch. I know you're in there. Sarah shrieked. Fine, Lucas panted. Have it your way. Boom. His first kick hit the door. The old solid wood shuddered but held. Boom. The second. I saw the wood splinter near the frame. He was panicked, furious, and using all his weight. Crack. On the third kick, the lock shattered. The frame gave way, and the door flew open, slamming against the wall. Lucas stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his face a blotchy purple-red. Sarah was right behind him, hair wild, eyes darting like a trapped animal. And they saw me. I wasn't on the floor. I wasn't cowering. I was sitting on the upholstered vanity stool as if it were a throne. My hands were folded in my lap, all except one, which was holding Arthur's brass letter opener. I was tapping it, slowly, against my palm. You, Lucas breathed. You're late, I said calmly, and you broke the door. That's going to be expensive to fix. You're insane, Sarah panted. No, I said, and I stood up. I'm just very, very disappointed. You couldn't even get this right. Killing a sick old man. How hard could it be? You failed, just like you failed with Chloe, that name. It landed in the small room and detonated. Lucas's face went white. Sarah's eyes darted to him, a new, horrifying understanding dawning. What? What are you babbling about? Lucas forced out, but his voice broke. Chloe, my daughter, your sister, I said, each word a hammer blow. The one who was tired of funding you? The one who knew what you were, that $2 million insurance policy, that boating accident. You really thought you got away with it? That's a lie, Sarah screamed, but she was looking at Lucas, not at me. Oh, it's true, I said. She was smarter than you, Lucas. Always. And she knew what you were. So she left breadcrumbs, a file. I nodded my head, just slightly, toward the toilet. Chloe always was good at hiding things. That was it. Greed. It overrode their fear. The evidence. No, Lucas whispered. Get it, he yelled at Sarah. Sarah, the obedient rat, scrambled past me. She fumbled on her knees at the base of the toilet, clawing at the heavy porcelain lid. It's stuck, she cried. His eyes were on her. His entire focus was on that file. The murderer. The almost murderer. He was just a greedy, scared boy, terrified of being caught. He was distracted. I wasn't. I am 68 years old, but I am a mother who lost her child. I took one step and drove the brass letter opener with all my strength into the side of Lucas's thigh. His scream was not what I expected. It was a deep, wet animal sound. His eyes widened in pure primal shock. He looked down at his leg, at the dark, arterial blood already soaking through his expensive slacks. He crumpled to his knees. Sarah spun around, her hands still on the tank lid. She looked at Lucas, at the blood, and at me, now standing in the doorway. You have a choice, Sarah, I said, my voice perfectly level. You can stay here with that, or you can run. She was a coward. She'd always been a coward. She looked at Lucas, then at me, and she ran. I heard her stumble down the hall, heard the front door slam. Good. Let her. She won't get far. I looked down at my son, who was sobbing on the floor of my bathroom. Mom, please. 911. My leg. He wept. My name is Eleanor, I said. I stepped over him. He lunged, trying to grab the hem of my robe, but he missed. I walked into the hall and pulled the broken door shut as best I could. The skeleton key they had used to lock me in was still hanging from the outside. I turned it. Click. He was in his prison now. I walked down the hall. The house was quiet. My house, I went to the study. Brenda was still unconscious in the chair. Her problem, I went to Arthur's bed. His eyes were open. Just a slit. But he was looking at me. I took his hand. It was cold, but I felt a faint pressure. I said I'd fix it, I whispered. I walked to the library. They had unplugged the landline from the wall. I plugged it back in. I picked up the receiver. The dial tone was the most beautiful sound in the world. I dialed 3 numbers. 911, 911, what is your emergency? My name is Eleanor Davenport, I said, and for the first time in a decade, my voice didn't shake. I'd like to report a murder. 2, actually.